Good morning. Happy Friday. I hope everybody's had a wonderful week. Hope everybody's going back to work. It looks like a lot of places are opening up. The Sacramento County Superior Court is accepting limited civil filings starting next week. So that's going to be awesome. Things are opening back up. I like that. I like it a lot. Let's get this economy going. Let's get people back to work. Let's restore some of the rights and liberties and freedoms and privileges that we once had. It was amazing. Last night I went to a bar in my area. I'm not going to name the bar because technically they weren't supposed to be open, and technically they weren't open. They just were allowing people to order to go, but sit there and eat off the bar's plates and drink out of the bar's glasses and use the bar's silverware. And, it was just takeout that we were just eating in the bar. It was amazing having service, having hot food straight out of the kitchen. It was just being in the ambiance, the atmosphere with other people. I mean, humans are social creatures, and humans need to socialize. And I am just stoked that we are moving towards freedom again. Anyway, that's not the point of this particular video, to tell you about my culinary habits. I saw a video. It's promoted by Freeman and by Earl. It was an officer who was exhorting his comrades to not enforce unconstitutional demands placed on them by their superiors in the chain of command, radiating down from governors and mayors and things like that. Now, with calling things unconstitutional, it's somewhat problematic. It's hard sometimes to determine when things are and aren't problematic, because as far as the Constitution is concerned, because like you would think that it would be unconstitutional to round up specifically all Japanese citizens, and place them into internment camps. One would think that would violate all sorts of constitutional rights, your due process, your privileges and immunities, your right to travel. Just you name it, it's pretty much denied it. And yet, the court held, Korematsu, I think it was, that it was justified because the military commanders had the right to exclude certain persons from specific areas, and they found that it was in the country's best interest, under a strict scrutiny analysis, to do so. So you got, it's hard to say that a certain thing is constitutional or not without having a court look at it. And even courts get it wrong. That's why we have not just the district courts, but you have the circuit courts and you have the Supreme Court, because courts get it wrong. And today, if we had Korematsu, then I'm not sure that the U.S. Supreme Court would come to the same decision. But certainly, we're not at war with Japan, so, that would make it even harder for them to come to that decision. But I'm not sure that they would come to that decision. So the question becomes, are some of these orders unconstitutional? Let's take a relatively easy one. Bill de Blasio has said you can't protest in New York City. Now, that is a suppression of your freedom of speech, your freedom of assembly, your right to petition the government for redress of grievances. It's basically just taking a big fat steaming dump all over the First Amendment. But does that make it unconstitutional? Well, what is the test? Because we've talked about this before, and the test is, if the government is going to do a blanket prohibition on speech, it has to be viewpoint neutral, And the government has to have a compelling interest in achieving some specific outcome. And the method that they use to achieve that specific outcome has to be narrowly tailored and the least restrictive method of achieving that outcome. When you start applying that to the COVID situation, the question becomes, is COVID a compelling government interest? Is preventing the transmission of the disease between people a compelling government interest? And honestly, I would suggest to you a court would find that that is a compelling government interest. I would suggest that. I can't guarantee that. I don't think it's a compelling government interest, but I believe a court would find that it is a compelling government interest. Is it viewpoint neutral? Well, yeah, I mean, Blasio didn't say why. You know, you could protest for reopening the government. You could protest against it. He didn't care what you're protesting for. He just said no protests, right? So it does appear to be viewpoint neutral. Now, in my opinion, the sticky wicket comes in, is this the least restrictive means of achieving the state's goal, or in this case, the city's goal, of preventing the spread of the disease? And that I don't know. And I mean, I could think of what I think would be less restrictive ways, but I don't know that they would be equally as effective. You know, require people to wear masks while they protest. I mean, that might be less restrictive, but would that be equally as effective? I don't know. Now, requiring people to stay in their homes, I don't know exactly what test the government would use on that. That's not a First Amendment issue. I am reasonably sure that there is a due process issue with that. I believe it was ex parte endo, which was the sister ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court to Korematsu, that said you can't detain a conceitedly loyal citizen. The government conceded that Endo was loyal. There was no issue as to her loyalty, and yet she was being interned in the Japanese internment camps along with everybody else. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, look, that's a due process issue. You can't do that. You've got to let her go. And that's really what precipitated the end of the Japanese internment camps. Well, I've heard a lot of people say that we're being quarantined. We're in quarantine right now, guys. Did you know that you're in quarantine? Well, quarantine means that you keep the sick people away from the healthy people. You quarantine the sick people because the sick people have the disease. You don't quarantine the healthy people. So we're not in quarantine. There are laws in California that allow the various county health, I don't know what you call them, health advisors, health ministers, health, I don't know. I really don't remember what you call them at this point. But it allows them to quarantine people. But quarantines, again, are for the sick, not for the healthy. So does it allow people to be quarantined if they are not sick? If the government would still have to come and show due process. The government would have to show that this person was in fact sick. And that this person would have in fact been spreading the disease. They're sick and they're infectious. Those are two things the government would have to show in order for their quarantine to be valid on a specific person. They have to do that for every person. So I don't personally think that the quarantine, the stay-at-home orders are constitutional. Now, do I think it violates the constitutional right to travel? No, that's between states. citizens of, there's two. There's one that allows citizens of a state to travel between states, and there's another one that prevents the governments of specific states from discriminating between their own citizens and citizens of other states without a good reason. So the question becomes, what would prevent a person from being, or what constitutional violation would the stay-at-home order be in violation of? And I believe that would be due process, Fifth Amendment due process. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the subject. I don't know that the officer is entirely right or entirely wrong, and I certainly don't think he's extrapolating his statements out beyond COVID. I mean, these are somewhat more blatant violations than just your normal, average, everyday officer violated my Fourth Amendment right by being too violent with the arrest kind of thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day.